that your week is starting off well. I'm still on summer vacation. I just wanted to get on here and talk about what has clearly been floating around the internet. And no, it's not the T app, although I have come into contact with so much information on TikTok as a result of it. But one of the things that has really been something that I have personally criticized, and now I feel the moment to speak on it, probably because I find it so disgusting. And I'm going to go ahead and give a disclaimer here. If you are a black elitist, if you are somebody who aspires to be a black elitist, this is not for you. If you're someone who is a black elitist and needs to, reorient your thinking, I welcome you. Okay? All right. So, speaking of black elitism, and that has whatever it is, it's not white elitism. Okay, let's all be clear in this racialized capitalist system. Okay, I just want to ask people who pledge sororities, do y'all feel a way? And I really am asking, do y'all feel a way when y'all see people become these honorary members of your sorority or your fraternity when you were hazed? And I know on paper nobody's supposed to be hazed. However, see Southern University. Okay, so miss me with the... Do y'all feel a way when all of these honorary members get inducted? Like Alpha Kappa Alpha, when they had their honorary members, you had people like Olympian Gabby Thomas, the former White House press secretary under Joe Biden, who was Corinne Jean-Pierre, the CNN analyst, anchor, and analyst, Laura Coates, and then model Beverly Johnson. Like, after people get hazed, go through this whole process where they have to do all this information, all this ass kissing. Like, do y'all feel a way when y'all see people inducted into your organization where you put in work? I remember meeting some friends one time who I met through another friend who we did a fellowship research program together, and he went to Tougaloo College in Mississippi. And he had asked for some help because he was doing a research presentation in Atlanta, and he had some of his friends who were also, they were either alphas or AKAs, the young men and young women. And they took me out to dinner, couldn't have been more gracious or nice or anything like that. And I just remember them having, just general conversation, especially once they realized I wasn't Greek. They were very, and they just said, golly, I wish I could be inactive on campus, and they don't allow you not to be active and not pay your dues if you're going to be on campus after pledging. And I remember thinking to myself, oh, and that's, of course, to keep campus life alive, and I get it. But I also was kind of like, when you look at honorary members and all of that goes into maintaining an organization on a campus, I'm just wondering, do y'all feel a way? Please tell me in the comments. Like, in Delta Sigma Theta, another one, I won't bother to go down everybody's sorority, but they just inducted, and I, only know this because somehow through HBCUs you get this stuff showing up on your TikTok. Delta Sigma Theta inducted Donna Brazile. Not that I don't appreciate Donna Brazile's work. I know she worked with the DNC, but she was also like really somebody that just stuck it to him on CNN and stuff for a long time. Danielle Brooks, who I love, who I can't wait to see her in more and more stuff because I feel like she is destined to be, I really like her. Queen Latifah. I am not suggesting that these are not Jackie Joyner-Kersee, Olympian, she's bad. You have Janice Bryant, Heroid, and, people like this who have accomplished things. Fawn Weaver, who, basically is the chief historian at Uncle Nearest Premium Whiskey, and it's named after Nathan Green, a formerly enslaved man who had essentially taught Jack Daniels how to distill liquor, whatever. But do y'all feel a way when, like, Queen Latifah, after y'all put all of this energy into elitism and having, you have to be a 4-year college graduate to get in there? I can't imagine how many times y'all done tried to offer Beyonce one of them honorary degrees, and she said no, because she has come from money. and came from a father who was a Fisk graduate and an Omega and probably told her about how these people roll. And don't say nothing to me about me drinking cranberry juice. We all get thirsty. Anyway, I'm just saying, do y'all feel a way about that? Does that make y'all, do y'all ever get bothered by that? Because I remember being in college and watching girls who are pledging Delta Sigma Theta. And as usual, Spelman would turn a blind eye and a deaf ear to things that were so obviously going on. And these girls running around that spring on campus in triangles. I mean, like running. Like they couldn't, like to me, it was so degrading and demoralizing. And, you know, when people had those big probate, because a lot of them people I didn't like anyway. A couple of them I did. But just like when they had those big probates, like the AKAs, I remember my friend was going to it, but she was trying to pledge and she didn't get on. And, you know, she had kind of distanced herself from me because it was one of those things that, you know, I already knew what the deal was. This was at the end of my sophomore year. And she had, I don't want to say her name, had said to me, oh, Salai, you on your way to the AKA probate? And I had my book bag on and I said, of course not. I'm going to the Science Center. The Science Center was where they had another computer lab. But I knew the probate was happening, but I knew everybody would be there. So I could sit in there and work and be quiet. I always had schemes. And she was like, well, you know, they said if I want to pledge again next year, her and her friend were kind of talking. And I said, oh, okay. Well, have fun. And I was just like, you still kiss these people's ass after they gave you their ass to kiss? Please. All right. Now, okay, we'll just say that as foundational. All right. So the Ralph Lauren collection, Oak Bluff, Spelman Morehouse, and I saw a young woman on TikTok. I don't know how old she is, but I did comment under her post, to which she completely missed my point. Her name is, what is this girl's name? I don't even remember because I screenshotted it. She basically presented the question of why does Spell House always get all the credit? Like, why do they have a Ralph Lauren collection, this, that, and the other? And she attempted to call herself, I guess, answering why Spelman and Morehouse deserve this. Let me begin by saying I am a Spelman College alumna, okay? Class of 2010. I am very proud to have gone to Spelman College. It changed my life for the better, okay? I don't feel the need like other people do. Well, you know, it's not perfect. Ain't no place perfect, okay? And there is a lot of pretension in college environments, but particularly this. And she was basically explaining why Grambling and all these other colleges, that's the one I can remember. But anyway, all these other colleges don't get the lines, like the Oak Bluffs line at Ralph Lauren. And so I left a comment that says, honestly, I think this is the wrong question, referring to why the Spell House get all the credit. The issue is that corporations are exploiting our association with a desire for elitism. The cops, environmental racism, and this so-called big, beautiful bill are killing us. Her response to me had zero, and I do mean zero, to do, what's her name? Shauna Miles' books. And she said, quote back to me, these institutions have always been exclusive, so I don't think it's exploitation. It's true that all of the I guess you meant HBCUs, have been committed to seeing people reach the height of academic excellence. However, that does not mean that they are egalitarian. Baby, you completely missed my point. My point, yes, they are exploiting it. Because part of elitism is everybody can't be in the group. Everybody can't be in the know. And it's based on racialized capitalism. This system, this country that we lived in is built on racialized capitalism. The gradations of race determined what kind of work you did. If you were of African descent, if your mother was black, you were black, and therefore usually born a slave. Or had to hire yourself out because they would not hire your black ass. Okay? So let's just go ahead and get that straight. And I'm sitting up here like just a few days ago, we're watching this black man ask the cops why is he being pulled over, and they tell him because he didn't have on his headlights in the middle of the day. And because he's asking questions, not disrespectfully, because he has every right to, a police officer punches his window into glass. They drag him out. That, to me, is the concern for the community. Not this. You up here looking at, and I knew this was going to piss me off, but I just think it is so corny. And I know people are going to go broke. People who are current students, and certainly people who have graduated. This is not to say that there were not plenty or a good amount of girls from small college who came from money. They came from money. That's fine. And typically the ones who came from the most, if we're going to keep it real, never told anybody about it. Never. Because that's part of the elitism. You can always tell people who are insecure about what they have by the way they have to brag about it. So here you have $998 sweaters, okay? That stuff is too high in the bookstore. I still to this day wouldn't dare buy anything with Spellman's name on it over $100. I still wouldn't do it. Let alone to give the money to Ralph Lauren to exploit the fact that black people do want to be associated with this. You have these sweat. Not only that, they don't even respect y'all enough to come up with fashion and designs that are appropriate in 2025. Y'all up here looking like Langston Hughes' picture at Lincoln University in 1920, 6, when he's sitting on that. He's at Lincoln in 1928, and he's got his little look or whatever. That was the look for the time. Then y'all also looking like y'all was at the Niagara movement, and a lot of y'all don't even know what that is. When Du Bois founded that, talk about black rights. Y'all up here walking around in old stuff. And the Oak Bluffs connection, because I'm somebody who reads, works hard, and studies history. Let's just be clear. Black people who went to Oak Bluffs, that part of Martha's Vineyard, which I think Martha's Vineyard is saturated, but whatever, that's just me. I've never been, I don't have any desire to go. But this was a little community part of Martha's Vineyard where black people went to not deal with the constant stress of segregation and racism. That's the narrative. The fact that there was a black section of Martha's Vineyard, what the fuck are we talking about here? Because y'all weren't allowed in those other places. And y'all gonna pay $1,000 for vintage fashion with your dumb asses. And I know people gonna be at homecoming, and there's gonna be a whole lot of people who put this on credit cards. I don't care how far you are. I am 15 years out of graduation from Spelman College. I am just not here for it. Now, I'm not saying that everybody's struggle has to always, every time you go shopping, you have to say to yourself, well, there's people starving in the Congo, and so therefore you shouldn't buy anything. I'm not going that far. What I am saying is, when you don't even know the right questions to ask, this is how we end up in this perpetual cycle. Now, I'm not crazy about the Nation of Islam. I have my own ideas about them, what I think is a cult, and I still think they are benefiting from the legacy of Malcolm X, despite the fact that they forced him out of the organization because he called him out on it for essentially what would be called trafficking underage girls at this point. And he was saying that before there was even a term for it. I say that to say that Elijah Muhammad, had a very famous quote, that no one man can rise above the condition of his people. And I believe that. And I believe that even as a Christian, when Jesus says, what you've done unto the least of these, you've also done unto me. So forgetting people who can't do that, and that's why, because this is what incurs the resentment I have for many of the people that I have met and known in Jack and Jill. Some much more tolerable than others. Um, this whole I'm not like the others and I got exposed to this, yes. But my problem also is that when you say, I was in Jack and Jill and I was part of this social club, for example, a teacher I used to work with who hated me, she was married to a white man, and I guess, and would make snide comments about my PhD and all this other stuff, all right, who I didn't even work with, like she just found me. And she was complaining one time in a people of color circle about she gets so tired of when people are constantly asking her kids, what are they? Now, when I looked at them, they just look like really, really light-skinned black girls, mixed at best. She was like, and they were asking them that at Jack and Jill, this, that, and the other. But my thing is, baby girl, who is the sister of an actor, I'll leave it there. My problem with that whole issue, as you talk about these things, right? Sure, that's not new for mixed kids to feel that way. You and somebody I met in graduate school who was ratchet to her core. I'm talking about just no class at all. I don't care what organization she was in. Jack and Jill, AKA, because she was always bringing up that she was in Jack and Jill. And then she had the nerve to say to me one day, she said, well, I never experienced racism until I came to UCLA. Now, she said some dumb stuff. I can't even go down the list about how ignorant this black woman was. And they kept passing her through at UCLA. And I was like, see, that's the game. You find the dumb black people, and those are the ones you give the big jobs to. So this way you can undermine the presence of really, really smart African Americans who have a conscience. You know what I mean? And I said, what do you mean you never experienced racism? She was like, I didn't. My point to her was, then why did you ever need to be a part of Jack and Jill? Why didn't you join the white social clubs of the people you were around? Why didn't you just do that? Oh, because you weren't welcome nor asked, right? And then to be like, of all places, from Youngstown, Ohio, and then brag about it. Let me tell you something. Even as a non-Jack and Jill, non-elitist, working class, poor family I came from, I can tell you this much. I can tell you this much. Don't you dare tell me that takes the same amount of competition as you have in places like Atlanta, New York City, Philadelphia, Los Angeles, Houston, like Chicago. Like, don't play with me. Okay? You are the beneficiary of somebody who had two gainfully employed parents in a town that had lost industry. And you just a notch above, because it's amazing to me how you not riding around in a Lambo and all your energy is basically going, worked on her PhD for 10 years. I graduated before she did and got there 4 years after her. I finished mine in 5. Okay, so I'm not just like, this is the kind of whack shit I'm talking about. And I'm not saying that every group of black people is going to always have something in common. You know, at least I know, walking past certain places in New York City, you can already know when you, I'm not putting up with that. I don't bother with that today. But there is still an understanding. And I thank God that my mother always taught me this. Don't you ever think you're better than anybody. And don't you ever let nobody make you think they're better than you. And she was like, I want you to always remember, as long as you, even though you don't have everything you want, even though I know you're going to do well in life, you'll be able to do better things for yourself, so on and so forth. Don't you ever forget that there are other people who don't have. And when you have it, you give it. And she was like, that's not going to always be money, but you get an education, you help somebody else get an education. Somebody's passed on to you X amount of money as you were trying to get through college. Just so you have extra money in your pocket, make sure you do that for somebody else. And so we passed homeless people on the street. My mother never judged homeless people. She dig in that ashtray. And she'd feel so bad if she didn't have cash to give somebody. And I watched both my parents do that. And my father did have a PhD. He chose to go into the ministry, and the ministry can be very shaky. You know, he had a church, but not a big one. You know, that's why I get so sensitive around the mega church conversation. I'm like, you know, he well-trained, real Baptist preacher. But I say that to say, I personally can't just operate like, you know what? One thing I will say is God has been good. Maybe things aren't as good as I'd like them to be, but I thank God they're not as bad as they used to be. You know, I thank God, you know, my brother came up to visit me a few weeks ago, and we could actually fight over who was going to pay the check. You know what I mean? Like, we were actually, because we were both now in a space of life. And that may not be a big deal to other people, but that's a big deal to me. And so when I work over the summer and I'm working with students and African-American students, because I work at a private school, I know that I have a responsibility. And when I see other people cheapen it and carry on like we are these black people, only to really delude yourself into believing that you are not the insular to them. I'm not saying that's what you are. I'm saying that's how they see you. And people who don't read and who always call themselves going in on people, W.E.B. Du Bois wrote The Talented Tenth. That was a chapter in The Souls of Black Folk. And that whole book is a classic. And W.E.B. Du Bois, people say, oh, The Talented Tenth is elitist. You know, how could he say these things? First of all, that has been widely misinterpreted. W.E.B. Du Bois's point, and it's not Du Bois, it's Du Bois. He was born in Great Barrington, Massachusetts. I always tell my students, somebody says Du Bois, they don't know what they're talking about. His whole point was that we have this small group of educated black people. This was a black man that went to Fisk. First black man to get his PhD from Harvard ever. And he got it in history, called The Suppression of the African Slave Trade. And sometimes had to sit outside the classes and just listen to the professor because they didn't want his black ass in there. Okay? And when he wrote that, he was saying basically the small group that has been able to obtain education, it is our responsibility to go back into the South where he was not even from, but had gone to school there, and utilize our skills to educate the masses so that they can become teachers, so they can become, you know, engineers, so they can become what they need to be. That is our responsibility. We do have a responsibility to do that. And they're like, oh, well, he's elitist because he's saying, you know, the educated should go down there. Yeah, black people didn't have no education. Georgia did not have its first black public high school until 1900. Do you realize how abysmal that is? Do you realize the intention was to keep them enslaved up here? You should read the book Fugitive Pedagogy. The amount of work that black people did to try to educate as many other black people, that's exhausting. And then to have people come along, the later Cornel West, who has never taught at a black college, by the way. Du Bois did taught at Clark Atlanta till he saw a black man's knees hanging in the window after being lynched, Sam Hose, in Noonan County, Georgia, and decided education wasn't going to be the thing that would ultimately lead to freedom. This problem is deeper, much more deep than he realized. And he writes an address in what year is it? 1948. In October of 1948. He was a member of Alpha Phi Alpha. That's why I started this video with that, right? And he gives something, he shows up to his national convention, you know, where all the brothers got together. And he called it the Talented 10th Memorial Address. And I'm just going to give you a little synopsis. You can go and look at W.E.B. Du Bois a reader. This is powerful. And you better get one before, you know, Trump deletes them all. Anyway, and he said, it's not that he said, basically, I have reflected on the Talented 10th. And I have to be honest, I still believe in the Talented 10th, which had been published in 1903. I still believe in the Talented 10th. But I also know it can't work. And he said it can't, and the reason why it can't work is not because it literally can't logically work, but because the black middle class is too selfish to make it work. You all are satisfied with the money you've made, with the cars you get to drive, with the education that you have, and you have sat around and refused to help the others who are not like you, whether you came from money, as he points out that most of them did not, okay, and got a leg up in the world, you don't care enough about the community to do your part. Martin Luther King is a democratic socialist, and he self-described that way to Coretta Scott King on their first date. Okay, so this whole idea that he was just so soft, and people go, well, he wasn't a good person, he cheated on his wife. You know what? They all did. That is between a husband and wife. We are not talking about a man who was punching his wife in the face. We are not talking about a man who abused his children. Okay, we have all fallen short of the glory, and allowing your enemies to release these over 200,000 pages, which a lot of you probably aren't even aware of, or try to tell you that somehow there's something so wrong with him as a person because he was having extramarital affairs. You don't let your enemies tell you who your hero should be. Yes, sure, he should not have done that. Now what? Neither should John F. Kennedy. Neither should LBJ. Neither should FDR. Like, you know what I mean? Give me a break. Just miss me. Especially people running around here in open marriages and doing all this other kind of stuff, and you want to sit up here and judge this man after he gave his life for a struggle. His same brothers in these elitist movements, because he had come from good stock, so to speak. He had come from a black middle-class family. His father was a well-established preacher in Atlanta. And black people in Atlanta and black people across the board were not happy with Martin Luther King at the time that he died. But they rioted when his death, because you feel the loss of what you needed. Because then it became apparent that even people who are trying to reason with the illogic of racism, anything can happen to them. But he had called them out, and all those people had distanced themselves from him. And so while this seems like a line, so on and so forth, like we didn't see the corporations just lie to us, Target, all of them, Bath and Body Works with those kente cloth, the Kenton cloth. Not Kenton, oh my gosh, Kenyan cloth. We say kente cloth, but it's Kenyan cloth. Around the candles and stuff like that. This is another leg of it. But there are a lot of people who just want to wear it because it gives black elitism of the past. And we are literally dealing with the slow yet fast destruction of the Department of Education. And the overwhelming majority of the country is educated in public schools. And even as I was listening to Frank Wilkerson, who, theorized Afro-pessimism, one of the points he made was that the Black Panthers would set up, these different schools. And a lot of black nationalist organizations did that, and they'll tell you about that. In the late 60s and 70s, a lot of them moved into education to make sure black kids were educated. And he was like, even with this, you have this kind of drain with the student loan system and all the interest, because there's no guardrails on these capitalist interest rates. They can borrow from the government. That's how Elon Musk had government contracts. The rich can borrow from the government at 0.002% interest. While those of us who went to school, did quote unquote the right thing, did what we were supposed to do, only to be met with walls, especially if you're black, especially if you're a black woman, especially if you're smart. That pet to threat thing is real. And so when I see people bowing down to this and only making Ralph Lauren rich, or, whatever two black designers or whatever they allowed on the team, miss me. And I really think some of y'all need to do the unlearning, because now we don't even have those black nationalist schools. And the more people who are caught up either in debt because of education don't have the ability to even be able to extend themselves as part of organizations that don't exist. They decimated our communities. Forget drugs. Drugs is part of it. But just with things like COINTELPRO destroying the knowledge and the institutional structures that so many different groups have built because they did not want us educated. And then for people to make this about, why Spelman and Morehouse are at the top. Spelman College has been the number one HBCU for about 20 years. It's one of the top liberal arts colleges in the country. It's one of the top women's colleges, even though we are not considered part of the Seven Sister Schools, which I didn't know existed, that concept, until a roommate I had in graduate school, who was a white girl who had graduated from Wellesley, said, you know what, I had brought this up over and over again, that Spelman needs to be part of the original Seven Sisters. And I was like, okay, just the first. And then I realized Spelman was established before several, like at least 2 or 3 of the people that made the 7 sister schools. They ignore black women's colleges. So what do we look like? Trying to be elitist so we can be not like those other black people, when they're still treating us like this in name and institution rank and everything else. I disagree with, that's where I stand. I hope for enlightened conversation. I don't want this to get wild or disrespectful. No, I don't agree with the principles of Jack and Jill. I'm annoyed by that woman who is married to that good black actor, who happened to come across my For You page. What is her name? What is that man's name? Sterling K. Brown, his wife. And she was like, it comes as no surprise, I was part of Jack and Jill. And I was like, yeah, it doesn't. Ever since I saw her on the OWN network, and she was talking about the way she said it, because I've seen her type, and yes, I can say this because I lived on the West Coast for 5 years. Don't pull it. When she did, well, you don't get to be a black woman that goes to Stanford and not do things by the book. Those are some of the dumbest people. Stanford, Princeton. Okay, I have met some dummies, okay, that went there undergrad. And just something about the way she said it, I had met enough black people like her to be like, she's so full of shit. Well, I went to Jack and Jill and I had a great experience. And, she's still like living that. This is the same woman who was basically saying that she had come from soothsayers who were, saying that they had all these visions about how he wasn't the right one and all this other weird shit. And I'm just like, and you walking around talking about you elitist? Your family sounds ignorant as hell. Don't pull it. There is such a thing as luck in education. There are so many things that could have happened to me. There are so many reasons why I did not have to make it as far as I've made it. And I mean a plethora of things. And it's not just money, mental health, like situations. There's such a thing as luck. There's such a thing as God's grace. And anything can happen to any of us. So the struggle should always be to ensure that other people have, and certainly have access to it. I know we're going to get on each other's nerves. I know black people are going to go back and forth. I know that there are degenerate elements. Don't get me wrong. But at the end of the day, the police bust your window out. When you ask questions, it's because you're black. And in their mind, you are out of order for even thinking. And so I'm sorry. Ralph Lauren's polo collection can kiss my ass. The Jack and Jill crew who think they are so much better than the others and want to go up to Martha's Vineyard for the African American Film Festival. And if you volunteer, you have to already have a place to stay. Now, there are some people struggling in college, okay, who will not have a place to stay. So it's basically the black elites. Okay, don't ask me. It just came up on my timeline on Instagram. Stuff like this. But anyway, that's all I have to say. You can leave a comment. Let me know what you think, and I'll talk to y'all soon. Bye.